When I walked in the door, the soft glow of her fitness tracker was the first thing that caught my eye. She was lying on the couch, her body curled up in the way she always did when she was trying to relax. She told me she was taking a nap, but the number staring back at me on the screen said otherwise. 200 calories burned. I froze, looking at the number like it was a puzzle I didn't know how to solve. It didn't make sense. She had been asleep for less than an hour. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it, my eyes flicking from the tracker back to her. She was breathing steadily, her face peaceful. But there was something in the way her chest moved, the tension in her jaw, that told me she wasn't as calm as she appeared. The burn of 200 calories, something she usually worked hard for at the gym, pushing herself with every rep, felt like a warning sign. I set my keys down, still staring at the screen, trying to figure out if I was reading it wrong. Maybe it was a glitch? But no. That number had been too steady, too certain. It wasn't a mistake. The door had barely clicked shut behind me when I heard her voice from across the room. "I'm awake," she said, barely above a whisper. Her eyes fluttered open, squinting at the light that filtered in from the kitchen. I didn't respond right away, my mind still stuck on the number, the implications of what it meant. It wasn't just about the calories. It was about everything else that had been happening in the last few weeks. The way she had been more withdrawn, the way she'd started to drift away from me, from everything we used to share. The naps, the quiet moments, the lack of energy. All of it had been building up into something I didn't know how to stop. "You're burning calories in your sleep now?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual, but even to me, it sounded like an accusation. She blinked, still half asleep. "What?" I held out the tracker for her to see. She blinked again, a little confused. Her expression didn't change immediately. 200 calories, Sarah. In an hour. "You're just napping, right?" She glanced at the screen, then back at me. "I don't know, maybe it's a glitch." I didn't believe her. I didn't want to. There was something in her voice, something unspoken that made me feel like I was missing the bigger picture. The way she avoided eye contact for a second too long, the way her breath hitched for just a fraction of a second. I wasn't sure if it was fear or guilt that made her pull the blanket closer to her chest. She tried to sit up, but the weight of the blanket made her movements sluggish. I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the way her shoulders slumped. She wasn't just physically drained, she was emotionally drained too. "I haven't been sleeping well," she murmured. "I guess that's why." "You haven't been sleeping well?" I asked, my voice low now, quieter. I was trying to understand. Trying to find some explanation that would make sense of this, of her, of us. She nodded slowly. "Just work, I guess. And everything else." I could see the way the words hung in the air, heavy and unspoken. There was more to it than just work and everything else. There always was with her, and I had learned it over the years to read between the lines, to notice the things she didn't say. Her avoidance, the small things she let slip by without really addressing them, told me everything I needed to know. She was hiding something, but I couldn't tell what. My instincts told me it was connected to this new routine, this change in her behavior. The naps, the unexplained fatigue, and now the burning calories while she was supposedly resting. Everything was slipping through my fingers, and I had no idea how to catch it. I sat down on the edge of the couch, closer to her now. She didn't look at me directly. Her eyes were unfocused, staring at the wall as though the room was too much to process all at once. "I can't keep going like this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just feel so off. All the time. I can't explain it." I felt the words like a punch to the stomach, the vulnerability behind them catching me off guard. She hadn't told me how bad it had gotten. She hadn't let me see how deeply she was struggling until this moment. I thought I was the one who had been in a fog, but looking at her now, I realized I had missed something crucial. "You're tired?" I asked, trying to make sense of it, of her. Trying to connect the dots in a way that might bring her back to me. She nodded again, her fingers curling around the blanket as though it were her only anchor to the world. "I'm just tired of everything. Of being tired. Of feeling like I'm not doing enough, or like I'm not good enough." That struck me like a ton of bricks. I had heard the words, but I hadn't really heard them. She wasn't just physically exhausted. She was mentally and emotionally drained, worn down by something I couldn't see, something I couldn't fix. And worse, she didn't know how to ask for help. I reached out and gently took her hand, surprised at how cold her skin was against mine. "Sarah, you don't have to do everything. You don't have to be perfect." She shook her head, but her eyes remained closed, as though the weight of everything was too much for her to carry. I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to let go of the pressure. I sat there in silence for a while, the weight of her words sinking in. I had no answers for her, no magic words to take away the hurt. But I knew one thing, that I wasn't going to let her carry this alone. "I'm here, Sarah," I said softly. "I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. Whatever you need, I'll help." She finally opened her eyes, just slightly, enough to meet my gaze. There was a flicker of something in them, something like hope, something like trust. But it was fleeting. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice fragile, like she wasn't sure she even deserved to be held up. "I don't know if I can get through this, but I need to try." I didn't know if she could either, but I wasn't about to let her do it alone. Not anymore. As I sat there beside her, watching her drift back into some semblance of sleep, the numbers on the fitness tracker continued to flash, mocking us in their silence. But now, I wasn't paying attention to them. I was paying attention to her. I was paying attention to the quiet battle she was fighting, to the weight of the things she was hiding. And as much as I wished I could make everything better for her, I realized something important. Sometimes, the only thing you can do for someone you love is simply to be there, even when you don't understand the fight they're in. Even when they don't understand it themselves. The next few days felt like they were moving in slow motion. I couldn't get the image of Sarah lying there, exhausted and pale, out of my mind. She'd said she was just tired, that she was off, but I could tell it was more than that. The signs were becoming clearer, even if she wasn't ready to confront them. I could see the weight of her thoughts in the way she moved, the way she avoided certain conversations. But I didn't know how to help her, how to crack open that shell she was building around herself. Every day, I tried to act normal, trying to pretend like nothing was wrong, but I felt the shift between us. There was a distance now, an invisible line drawn between us, and I wasn't sure how to cross it. I could tell she was retreating further into herself, but she was still the same Sarah, the same woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. There was just something off. I was starting to question everything. Had I missed something? Had I done something to make her feel like this? Had she already been breaking without me noticing? The guilt was eating me alive, gnawing at my insides every time I looked at her. One night, I sat down beside her while she was working on her laptop, the soft hum of the screen illuminating her face in the dim room. She was staring at it with a level of focus that seemed almost unnatural, her fingers typing quickly. She didn't even seem to notice when I sat down, and that only made the distance between us feel more real. "What are you working on?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but my voice came out strained. She didn't look up from the screen. "Just some work stuff." I nodded, but something about her answer didn't sit right with me. It was too vague, too defensive. I wasn't even sure why it bothered me. Work stuff was work stuff, right? But everything about the way she was acting felt like a red flag. The way she avoided eye contact, the way she held herself stiffly when she used to lean into me when we were close. It was like she was closing herself off piece by piece, and I had no idea how to stop it. I tried again. "Sarah, are you okay?" She finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine. There was something in them, something I couldn't quite read, fear, maybe, or guilt. But she didn't say anything right away. Instead, she just let out a soft sigh and rubbed her temple, her fingers pressing against the skin like she was trying to will the pain away. "I'm fine," she said, but I could hear the lie in her voice, even if she didn't want to admit it. The silence hung between us for a long time before I spoke again. "You don't have to do this alone, you know. Whatever it is, whatever's going on, you can talk to me. You don't have to keep it in." She dropped her gaze, staring at her hands on the keyboard for a moment, like she was calculating her next move, deciding whether or not to say what was really on her mind. I could tell she wanted to, but she was holding back. The vulnerability was written all over her face, and it tore me apart to see her like this. I didn't want her to feel like she had to hide from me, but I also didn't know how to push her when she wasn't ready to open up. I'm tired," she said quietly. "And not just physically. It's like I can't get my head straight, you know? Everything feels like it's out of control." I wanted to reach out, to pull her close, but I held back, not wanting to overwhelm her. But what I couldn't stop was the surge of concern that hit me like a tidal wave. Is it something with work? Or is there something else going on?" She shook her head. "It's not work. It's me, I think. It's like I can't breathe. I can't relax. And when I try, it's like everything is just too much. I'm so exhausted, but I can't sleep, and when I do sleep, it doesn't feel like enough." My heart broke a little more with each word. I knew she was struggling, but hearing her say it out loud, hearing the pain in her voice, it was different. It felt real now. I had thought I'd been a good partner, that I was paying attention to her needs, but somewhere along the way, I had missed this. I had missed her. "You're allowed to rest, you know," I said softly, my voice a little choked. "You don't have to push yourself so hard." "I know, but I can't stop. I don't know how." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to do something, anything, to take away the pain, to fix it. But I felt helpless, like a spectator in her life instead of a part of it. I wasn't the one she turned to when things got difficult, and that realization stung more than I cared to admit. "Why don't we take a break?" I suggested gently. "We could get away for a weekend, just the two of us. Something to get your mind off everything. I know you've been working so hard, and maybe a little time away would help." She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room like she was looking for an escape, like the idea of leaving everything behind scared her more than facing it. "I don't know," she said quietly. "Maybe? I just don't feel like I'm enough anymore. I don't know how to fix myself, and I don't want you to have to deal with it." My chest tightened. It wasn't that I didn't want to deal with it, it was that I didn't know how to. "You are enough, Sarah," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil I felt inside. "You're more than enough. And I'm not going anywhere. But I need you to let me in. I need you to tell me what's really going on, so I can help." Her eyes softened for just a moment, like she wanted to believe me, but the walls around her heart were too thick, too high for her to let anyone in. I couldn't force her to open up, not if she wasn't ready. But I had to try. For her. For us. "I'm here," I whispered, my hand reaching for hers, gently wrapping my fingers around hers. "Whenever you're ready." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she just leaned back into the couch, her eyes closing again, her face strained with exhaustion. I could tell that this was a long road, one that would take more than just patience and understanding. It would take healing, and trust, and time. And I would give her all of it, no matter how long it took. The fitness tracker buzzed on the table, a soft reminder of how little control we both had over what was happening. I glanced at it briefly before turning my attention back to Sarah, knowing that whatever came next, I would be here, waiting for her to find the strength to face it with me. But for now, I would be the steady hand she needed to hold. The next morning, Sarah didn't wake up until well into the afternoon. She had been up late again, working on some project that had consumed her energy the entire week, and I could tell that the exhaustion had taken a toll on her. She looked different when she slept, peaceful, still, like the weight of the world had momentarily lifted off her shoulders. I found myself staring at her as she lay there, the soft rise and fall of her chest a rhythmic reminder of her vulnerability. In those quiet moments, it was easy to forget about all the tension that had been building between us. But as soon as she woke up, that all came flooding back. I had tried to act normal, to create some semblance of normalcy in our home, but it felt forced. The casual conversations felt artificial, like we were two strangers trapped in a relationship that wasn't what it used to be. And Sarah, for all her quiet resilience, was slipping further away. It wasn't that she wasn't trying, it was that she didn't know how to fix it. And neither did I. When she finally stirred, I was sitting on the couch, a book in my lap that I hadn't touched for hours. I hadn't even realized how much time had passed. Her eyes fluttered open, and she blinked at the sunlight streaming through the blinds before slowly sitting up. "Hey," I said gently, putting the book down and crossing the room. "How are you feeling?" She gave me a half smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Tired, I guess. I didn't sleep much last night." I nodded, though I knew that wasn't the only reason. "I was thinking maybe we could go out today. A walk or something? Just to get some fresh air. You've been stuck inside too much lately." "I don't know if I'm up for it," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "Maybe tomorrow." I didn't press her. Instead, I sat back down on the couch, trying to give her space but also not wanting to give up on the idea of us doing something together, anything that might bring us closer again. "I was just thinking about what you said yesterday," I began, my voice careful, "about feeling like you can't relax. You don't have to carry all of this on your own, Sarah. Whatever's weighing you down, you don't have to face it by yourself." She turned to look at me, her eyes searching mine. There was a flicker of something there, uncertainty, maybe, but she quickly looked away. "I know," she said softly. "But sometimes I feel like I'm not enough. Like I'm constantly failing at everything. It's like no matter how hard I try, I'm always falling short." "I know that's not true," she added quickly, "but it's how it feels." Her words landed on me with the weight of 1,000 bricks, and I could hear the struggle in her voice. It wasn't just exhaustion she was fighting. It was a deeper, quieter battle. I could tell she was still holding back, afraid to completely give in, to let herself be vulnerable. I wanted to reach across the distance between us and pull her into my arms, but I didn't want to force anything. Not when she wasn't ready. I don't want you to feel like that, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You are more than enough, Sarah. You always have been. And I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. There was a long silence before she finally met my gaze again. This time, her eyes held something that resembled a mixture of relief and sorrow. I don't know if I can be fixed, she said, almost in a whisper. I don't even know what's wrong with me, to be honest. It's like I'm just broken. Like all the pieces of me are scattered, and I don't know how to put them back together. I felt a lump form in my throat. It was painful to hear her speak like this, to hear the woman I loved so much express this kind of self-doubt. I knew she had been struggling, but hearing her voice that pain out loud was like a punch to the gut. You're not broken, I said firmly, my voice steady despite the sadness that threatened to overwhelm me. You're just lost right now. And that's okay. It doesn't make you any less of the person I love. She didn't say anything at first. Instead, she just let out a shaky breath, her gaze turning away as if she were trying to hide from the words I had said. The distance between us seemed to stretch wider in that moment, even though we were both sitting just a few feet apart. I feel like I've been pretending for so long, she finally admitted, her voice so soft I could barely hear it. Pretending that I'm okay when I'm not. Pretending that I have everything together when I'm falling apart inside. And I'm afraid that if I let you see the real me, you won't want to be around anymore. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat growing. Her words were so raw, so filled with fear. Fear of losing me. Fear of not being enough. You don't have to be perfect, Sarah, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You just have to be you. And that's enough for me. It always has been. Her eyes glistened as she looked up at me, a tear slipping down her cheek. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, but she seemed so fragile in that moment, like if I touched her, she might shatter into a million pieces. I don't know if I believe that, she said softly, the doubt in her voice evident. I moved a little closer to her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel my presence. I know you don't. But I do. And I'll be here until you can believe it too. I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here. There was a long silence between us, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't awkward. It felt like the first step toward something real, something honest. Slowly, Sarah wiped her cheek, a shaky smile tugging at her lips. Thank you, she said, her voice barely audible. I nodded, relieved to see a small glimmer of light in her eyes again. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I'm here, I repeated, my heart beating a little faster. Whenever you're ready, we'll face this together. You don't have to carry it alone. Sarah took a deep breath, nodding slowly as if the words were beginning to sink in. I wasn't sure how long it would take for her to believe them, but I was determined to help her find her way back. I would be patient, I would be there, and I would not let her face the darkness alone. Not now, not ever. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed that we could make it through this. Together. The days that followed felt like walking on a tightrope. I wanted to push Sarah to open up, to talk about everything that was weighing on her, but I didn't want to pressure her too much. I knew she wasn't ready to face everything all at once. She had said that she felt like she was falling apart inside, and I could see it, her internal battle was written all over her face. The exhaustion, the guilt, the quiet sadness. I was helpless, and yet I had to be there for her, as much as I could. Each day, she seemed to get more distant. I would catch her staring out the window, her eyes unfocused, as if she was lost in a world of her own. She wasn't present in the way she used to be, there was a heaviness about her that I couldn't ignore. And as much as I wanted to help her, I didn't know how to. I wanted to fix everything, but she wasn't ready to be fixed. One evening, I came home from work and found Sarah sitting on the couch, her fitness tracker on the coffee table in front of her. She had been obsessively checking it lately, like it held some kind of answer to the exhaustion that was overwhelming her. I hadn't said anything, but the way she had been looking at the numbers, comparing them to how she felt, told me that the tracker was her way of trying to regain control. She didn't notice me at first. Her eyes were focused on the little screen, her finger tapping through the stats as if they might reveal something she wasn't seeing. Sarah? I said gently, trying not to startle her. She glanced up, blinking as if she had been pulled out of a trance. Oh, hey. I took a seat beside her, but I didn't touch her. I could sense the walls around her, and I didn't want to breach them unless she invited me in. What's going on? I asked softly, though I already knew the answer. I could see the unease in her eyes, the way her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her shirt. She was avoiding my gaze again. She let out a long, heavy sigh. I don't know. I thought if I kept track of everything, maybe it would help me figure things out. The tracker says I burned 200 calories while I was napping today. I should have been resting, right? I should have been sleeping, but instead I'm sitting here, obsessing over these numbers. I'm not even doing anything, but I'm still not enough. I felt the weight of her words settle heavily in the room. I knew she was exhausted, physically and mentally. But I hadn't realized how much the pressure she was putting on herself was adding to it. It wasn't just her body that was failing her, it was her mind, too. She was trying to outrun herself, trying to keep up with an invisible standard that was slowly suffocating her. Sarah, I said softly, turning to face her. This isn't you. You're not defined by numbers on a screen or by what your tracker tells you. That thing, I pointed to the fitness tracker, it's not going to tell you what you really need. You don't need to keep pushing yourself. You need to let yourself rest. She bit her lip, her eyes darting away as if she was struggling with what I was saying. I know. But I don't know how to stop. It's like I'm scared that if I slow down, everything will catch up with me. All the things I'm running from will catch up with me. The guilt, the feeling of being inadequate. I can't face that, not yet. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. I had seen the way she had been pushing herself, how she would work late into the night, checking off one task after another, never giving herself a moment to breathe. And now, even when she was trying to rest, her mind was still running. She was trapped in her own cycle of overwork and exhaustion, unable to break free. You don't have to carry that burden alone, Sarah, I said gently, reaching out to touch her hand, this time not hesitating. I'm here, and I'll stay here as long as it takes. But you have to let me help. Let me take some of that weight for you. She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, like she was trying to read something that was hidden beneath the surface. I could see the hesitation in her expression, the way she wasn't sure if she could trust what I was offering. It wasn't that she didn't want to, I could tell, it was that she didn't believe she deserved it. She didn't believe she deserved to be taken care of when, in her mind, she was the one who was always supposed to be the caretaker. I don't want to drag you into this, she whispered, her voice almost breaking. I don't want you to see me like this. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I squeezed her hand, willing her to understand. It's not about feeling sorry for you, Sarah. It's about loving you. It's about sharing this with you, the good and the bad. I choose to be here, no matter what. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, with everything we hadn't said to each other in weeks. There was so much to unpack, so much pain, so much fear. But it felt like, in that moment, we had reached a quiet understanding. Maybe we weren't ready to fix everything right then and there. But we had taken the first step toward healing. I'm scared, she said finally, her voice small and vulnerable. I'm scared that if I stop, I'll lose myself. That everything I've worked for will unravel, and I'll be left with nothing. I gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, my thumb lightly tracing her cheek. You won't lose yourself, Sarah. You're still here, even if you can't see it. You're just lost right now. And that's okay. But you don't have to go through this alone. She nodded, the tears finally falling freely down her cheeks. I don't know how to stop, how to give myself permission to take a break. I pulled her close, wrapping my arms around her, holding her tightly. You're allowed to rest, Sarah. You're allowed to stop, even if it feels uncomfortable. You don't have to do this by yourself anymore. For the first time in weeks, Sarah seemed to relax into my arms. I could feel the tension slowly starting to melt away from her body. She wasn't fixed yet. We both knew that. But it felt like we were finally on the right path. And that was enough for now. In the quiet that followed, I made a promise to myself. I would do whatever it took to help her heal. I would stand by her side and be her strength when she felt weak, her support when she needed it. We might have a long road ahead of us, but I would be there for every step, every stumble, every breakthrough. We would get through this together. And that was something worth fighting for. The weeks that followed were a blur of small steps, moments of progress, setbacks, and quiet breakthroughs. Sarah's recovery, if you could even call it that yet, wasn't linear. Some days, she seemed to have it all together, her spark returning, her laughter filling the rooms once more. But other days, she was still distant, still grappling with the weight of the world that she had carried for so long. I knew better than to expect anything perfect. I had seen how deeply she had been struggling, how long she had been pushing herself to the brink. And I understood now, more than ever, that healing wasn't something that could be rushed or fixed with a single act of kindness. It was a process, a journey, one that would take time. But one thing had shifted. Sarah had started to open up to me in ways she hadn't before. And I wasn't going to take that for granted. The conversations between us became deeper, less surface level. We didn't just talk about the weather, or what we'd had for dinner. We talked about the things that had been eating at us, the things that kept us up at night, the things we were afraid to admit even to ourselves. And though it was hard, though it was sometimes painful, it felt real. It felt like we were finally connecting again. It wasn't just about the big moments either. The little moments mattered, too. The way Sarah would give me a soft smile when I made a joke, the way she'd grab my hand when we walked down the street together, the way her eyes seemed to brighten when I asked how her day had been. The connection was still there, beneath all the walls she had built, waiting for us to find our way back to it. One evening, after a particularly long day for both of us, I found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her fitness tracker once again. She was quiet, lost in thought. I had been watching her from the doorway for a few moments before I decided to approach. "Hey," I said softly, stepping into the kitchen. "How's it going?" She didn't look up right away. "I don't know. I guess I'm just thinking about everything. I've been tracking my steps, my calories, everything, but I don't know anymore. I think I'm just trying to figure out what's wrong with me." I pulled out the chair next to her and sat down, leaning in slightly, just enough to show her I was there. "What do you mean, trying to figure out what's wrong with you?" "I just feel like I'm not enough. I'm not enough for you, for myself, for anyone." She shook her head, frustration seeping into her voice. "I keep doing all these things, trying to fix everything, but it's never enough. And I know, deep down, that it's not about the numbers or the tracker. But I can't shake it. I can't shake this feeling that something's missing." I let her words hang in the air for a moment. I knew she wasn't talking about calories or steps anymore. She was talking about something deeper, something more fundamental. She was questioning her worth. "I don't think you're broken, Sarah," I said quietly, my voice steady, though I felt the weight of her words pressing against me. "But I know you feel like you are. And that's okay. It's okay to feel like that. You're allowed to be frustrated. You're allowed to feel lost. But you don't have to stay there. You don't have to keep chasing after something that isn't even real." She blinked, her gaze flickering to me for just a moment, then back to the tracker. She wasn't looking for reassurance in my words. I knew that. She was searching for some kind of truth, something she could hold on to. "I keep thinking that if I just get the numbers right, then I'll feel better. Like if I just get this part of my life in control, then the rest of it will fall into place. But that's not happening, is it?" I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "No. It's not happening. Because you're chasing something that doesn't matter. Those numbers don't define who you are. They're not the answer." She didn't respond at first. Instead, she stared at the screen of her tracker for a long time, her fingers frozen in place, hovering over the button as if she was debating something. And then, without warning, she slid the tracker off her wrist and set it down on the table. "I don't want this anymore," she said quietly, her voice almost a whisper. I blinked, surprised by her sudden decision. "You're done with it?" She nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "Yeah. I think I need to be. I've been looking for the wrong things for too long. I thought that if I could just control everything about my body, I could control everything else in my life. But it doesn't work that way, does it?" "No," I said gently, my voice soft but firm. "It doesn't. You don't need to control everything. You need to live. You need to be." She smiled faintly, though it was tinged with sadness. "I'm scared, you know. I'm scared that if I stop trying so hard, I'll fall apart completely." "You won't fall apart, Sarah. I'm here, remember? You're not alone in this. And you don't have to be perfect. You're allowed to be imperfect." Her shoulders seemed to relax just a little bit. "I don't know if I'm ready for that, but I want to try. I want to stop feeling like I'm failing all the time." "You don't need to try to fix everything all at once," I said, my voice calm. "You just need to take it one step at a time. And I'll be here with you every step of the way." She finally turned to face me, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she whispered, the words sounding like a weight being lifted from her chest. And in that moment, I felt it too, a weight being lifted, a shift, however small it was. It wasn't the end of the road. We still had a long way to go. But it was a start. A real start. I love you, I said, reaching for her hand. No matter what. She squeezed my hand, her fingers warm against mine. I love you too. It wasn't a grand, dramatic moment. It wasn't the kind of breakthrough you see in the movies. But it was real. And sometimes, that's all that matters. We were on the right path again. Together. And for the first time in a long while, I believed that we could make it through this. We weren't perfect, and we didn't have all the answers. But we had each other. And that was more than enough.